Hey, Nathan, it's the ATC at Home show, episode 2 of your lawn improvement project. How you doing?
I'm great. Can't believe I finally made it on the show.
Yeah, well, I visited in early March and we thought, hey, it's almost springtime, should be lawn season, and your lawn was covered in snow, so I did not get to see exactly what the grass looked like. But I've got to ask now, is the snow melted already?
Yeah, the timing of that was a little bit off. The snow's completely gone now, so things are looking much more green. I don't know if I should mow it. It's going to be at that time soon where I'm going to have to get the lawnmower out, so I need maybe a little direction on when to do
Hmm.
that, when's the best time to cut the grass, but also you know the soil sample. I never taken one before, so I don't really know what to do or how to do it.
Yeah, I think let's let's get started with the soil sample immediately. Now, I typically would recommend soil sampling in the autumn. And the one of the reasons why I like to sample in the autumn is because we're not going to apply any fertilizer in the winter. So if we do the testing in the autumn, we've got all winter to make a fertilizer plan for the next year. Now, because we're starting this project in the spring, we're a little bit rushed. So this is not the perfect time to do it, but it's actually a common time for people to do it. A lot of people take soil tests in the springtime. So this is still a good time. Let's get soil samples from your front lawn and another sample from your back lawn. We'll get those sent to a lab. We will interpret them in the most modern and effective way that I'm aware of, which is MLSN. And we can talk about, I'll tell you a little bit about how that's going to be.
Sure.
And then we'll get you a good fertilizer plan and we'll know what some of the important soil characteristics are. But you mentioned mowing. Is the grass growing? So let's deal with the mowing issue first, and then get into the soil
It
testing.
doesn't seem like it's growing yet, but this week where it's a lot warmer out, so typically the end of this month is probably when I would get that mower out and start making it look
Okay,
nice.
perfect. That is perfect timing. I wouldn't think that the grass would be growing enough that you'd need to mow it quite yet at your location because it was just covered in snow as recently as a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Correct.
Okay. So let's deal with the mowing later. Just hold off on that. But you might want to make sure that the engine oil is changed on the mower. Do you have a gasoline powered mower or you just do it with muscle power?
It's gas powered, but it still takes some muscle to push it across the lawn. I don't have a ride on mower yet, but yeah, we do with what we got here.
Okay. Well, good. So if you want to do anything, don't run the mower, but you may check that it starts and make sure the spark plugs are cleaned and the oil's changed or filled or whatever, and just make sure that that'll be ready to go when it is time to mow. Um, I I will run some calculations for the temperatures at your site and predict by growth potential how the grass may grow at different times of the year. We can integrate fertilizer recommendations that I'll make based on the soil test. Now, you said you've never done soil testing before. Is that right?
Correct. I have no idea how to take a sample, or like, do I just take off the top with grass, without grass, like, or do I have to go certain depth down, like for more than one area? Like, you tell me, and I'll do it.
Yeah, I think that you definitely have a front lawn and you have a back lawn, and we introduced those in the last episode that I think people can watch and see what we were talking about trying to make your lawn as good as it can be this year. What we'll do with soil testing, we'll be looking at a couple of things. We're going to make a fertilizer plan based on the soil testing because the soil test is going to go to a specified depth in the soil and tell us what the nutrients are, and it's also going to tell us what the soil pH is, which is quite important for how grass will grow. And it will tell us how much organic matter is in the soil, which is really important for how much nitrogen fertilizer you will need to put in your climate. So, what we will do with the soil test, I'm going to recommend going to a depth of 10 centimeters, which is 4 inches. And I'm going to recommend that you use a tool that you already have. And I
Okay.
suppose you have a spade or a shovel.
Yes.
Do you have a trowel or a
Yep.
small little kind of tool?
Yeah.
So we don't need very much material. Your dog digs a lot of holes in the lawn, doesn't it?
In the backyard, yes, there's multiple holes that are well past that depth, so
Okay.
getting access
So
to that
adding
soil will be a problem.
so I'm trying to decide now how many samples I should have you take. So typically here's how it's done. The standard recommendation for soil testing is to take from each area that you test. So we're going to call your front lawn is one
Right.
area and your back lawn is a second area. The standard recommendation is to take a lot of samples. Each one would be to the 4-inch or 10 centimeter depth. Put them in a bucket, mix them together. And specifically, the standard recommendation is to take 12,
Okay.
which, but it's a lot because that would be 12 samples from the front lawn, 12 samples from the back lawn. I've been doing some research about this. I think we can get away with doing less. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Let's do a compromise. Let's do five.
Okay.
So let's do five small samples to a 10 centimeter depth from the front lawn and do 10 small samples. Sorry,
Fine.
five. I'm
Yep.
misspeaking all over the place. Five small samples from the front lawn in a bucket mixed together, and that's your sample for the front lawn. But then we're going to pull out a small amount of that to actually
Yeah,
send
because
to
I'm
the
not
lab.
sending the whole all five of the soil. How much of that soil do I need to pull out after it's been mixed for
I'm
like
gonna
sending
I'm
off?
gonna ask you to send 100 cubic centimeters,
Okay.
100 milliliters in volume, and that will be enough.
Okay.
And then in the backyard, I'm going to ask you to take five subsamples. These are called subsamples. Put them all into a bucket, mix it together to homogenize that material, and then from that take out 100 cubic centimeters, which will be enough material to run at the lab.
And based on those results and the weather, you
Mhm.
can predict on how
I'm
to
gonna,
best
based on
use it.
that, I'm gonna tell you if you need to apply lime or not. I'm going to tell you how much nitrogen I recommend you apply for your lawn, and I'll predict because we'll measure the organic matter. I'll be able to look up the weather for your location. I'll be able to tell you how much nitrogen should be released from the soil throughout the year, which is a way for us to then back calculate from that how much fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer, we may need to apply to get the desired turf results. And I'll be able to tell you if you need to apply potassium and if you use phosphorus. Now we'll have to check. I think you're in Ontario, and it may be that in the province of Ontario there are some government restrictions on phosphorus use. So we'll need to look into what those are and make sure that you apply those responsibly. But typically, a responsible way to apply phosphorus is to test the soil first, find out if the grass needs it, and if it does need it, based on a soil test, you're typically allowed to apply. So we'll look into that. But I suppose your grass has, I suppose the soil may already have enough phosphorus, in which case my recommendation would be you don't need any more. Now, this is based on something called MLSN. And have you
Okay.
heard of MLSN?
No.
I don't
What
think
is
a lot of
what does
home
that
lawn
stand for?
users have. MLSN stands for Minimum Levels for Sustainable Nutrition. And these are guidelines that I actually helped develop back in 2012. So this is year 11 of MLSN. They've been used with great success all over the world. And this is something that I call a modern method for turfgrass soil test interpretation. It's pretty cool. You'll see when you get the report how I will compare your lawn's test result to the MLSN guidelines. And you'll see if you're above that guideline or if you are below that guideline.
Very cool.
Yeah, incredibly cool. It's designed to prevent nutrient deficiencies. And so we will make sure that your lawn is supplied with all the nutrients that it can use. And at the same time, we're going to minimize unnecessary fertilizer applications. So we've got that ticker at the bottom of the screen that is showing what MLSN does. That's what we're going to do for your lawn. And I guess the one other thing I'm going to recommend, do you have a room in your house? I don't want you to make it too dirty. And I know you've got the dog running around and some children running around. I don't want them to have too much fun playing and making mud balls with those soil samples. But I would love those samples to be dried before you send them to the lab. The
Okay.
reason why is because soils are alive. We can think of soils as being alive in that there are microbes in the soil. There are chemical reactions that are happening in the soil as long as there's water in the soil. But if you dry soil, it's effectively the same as freezing it. So just like we can preserve meat by freezing it, we can also preserve soils and make sure that they don't change by drying them. And I wonder if in your garage or if in somewhere in the basement, perhaps you'd be able to spread those
Spread
soil
it out.
samples
Yep.
out on a piece of newspaper or something, and maybe put a fan on it or just let them air dry for a few days until it's dry. And that means that your organic matter won't be breaking down, the microbes won't be doing anything in the soil, there will be no more potassium coming into the soil or going back into soil minerals. You'll just kind of fix the soil, freeze the soil exactly the same as it was when you pulled the sample out of your lawn.
Okay. And that'll keep the test results better when they get to the lab, I'm assuming. Is that? Yeah.
Yep. And it also will minimize your shipping cost because you're going to be shipping these internationally. I'm going to recommend you send these to Brookside Labs in Ohio, which is the lab that I always use. It is a world-class
Okay.
laboratory. And I'll be able to get you, because it's an international sample, I'm going to have to send you an import permit and a special label for these samples to make sure that we legally send them to the
Okay.
U.S. But because you've got the international shipping to deal with, and also because the samples change from the time you take them out of the soil if they stay wet, and the temperature changes too. Right now the soil might be at an average temperature of 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. Maybe the temperature is even a little bit cooler. You take those out of the soil and then you put them in the post, and then you send them in over the border and into the US. You can't control what temperature it is anymore. It could be that they get put in a vehicle that's at 30 degrees Celsius or 85 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. All if they're wet, those microbes will go crazy and start releasing a lot of nitrogen and changing the chemical characteristics of the soil. So to do this properly, and I'm recommending to you the exact same method that I would recommend for professionally managed turf. I always recommend that the samples get air
Okay.
dried prior to sending. So that's a little bit of, I'm only asking you to
No,
collect two
it's,
samples, so
yeah, I
maybe
can
you
do
can
that.
do that.
Yeah, for
Cool.
sure.
Cool. Thanks. Well, I'm going to follow up with an email. I will follow up with an email just to remind you about the specific depth and the specific number of subsamples. And we really like the perfect soil sampling tool is going to be about 2 or 3 centimeters in diameter, and it's just like a pipe that you put into the soil. But I don't think you have one of those. But
Yeah.
you don't. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to use a trowel or a small garden spade. But
Okay.
remember, we don't need a big pile of soil. I just want you to take something that's similar to like a 2 centimeter or 3 centimeter diameter amount
Sure.
down to a 10 centimeter depth. And so you can do that. You'll take a big chunk of soil and then just cut the corner off of it. And that'll be
Good
something like
enough.
a 3 centimeter tube.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
pretty easy. And if we keep working on your lawn, I'm going to get you a proper soil sampler. But for now, let's just work with what we have.
Okay.
And
Yeah, it's
then
not a problem.
yeah, I guess oh, you asked about leaving the grass on it. Machine at the laboratory that will remove the grass. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you just dry it. Dry it. That'll stop the grass from growing, and
Perfect.
that will be fine. And so instead of you trying to pinch off the top, we'll just let the machines at the laboratory do it.
Good.
And because the machines at the laboratory do it the same way every time, then I think that's more consistent.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess I got to get to work now.
Yeah. Good luck. Thanks. I would have helped you collect the samples last time, but the ground was frozen. So
Yeah.
I'll let you do it this
Little
time.
difficult.
Thanks, Nathan.
All right. Thanks for your help, Micah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right. As you've seen, Nathan collected those samples and he did as I instructed and used a spade. Now, ideally, we'd use a proper soil sampler, and ideally, we'd collect these samples in the autumn, as I mentioned, but we were in a hurry to do it. So I said, go ahead and use a spade, cut it down to a 10 centimeter depth or 4 inches, and then dry the samples. And I had him stir those samples in the bucket so as he took those subsamples, he already mixed them up inside the bucket, and then he spread them out to dry in the house, and he then stirred them up on those drying trays also. So he had a dried and mixed sample, and then he scooped out the proper volume and he put it in a bag and labeled it and sent it to the laboratory. Now, when doing international samples, there can absolutely be no spillage of soil in the sample box. If there's spillage of soil, that package of soil could be discarded. So I asked him to double bag the samples, which he did, and sealed it very well. And then Nathan attached a unique label to the sample box. This unique label is for the import permit that allows the package of soil to come into the United States. It's a quarantine material, and it will be incinerated after the sample is finished at the laboratory. But it's allowed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to enter the country to a certified facility if it has that particular label on it. So he did that, and he sent it to the U.S., and those samples are now on their way to the laboratory, to Brookside Labs, where they will get a complete set of tests, and then I will be able to make some fertilizer recommendations, and we'll keep working on making Nathan's lawn the best one on the block, maybe the best one in the neighborhood, and something that will be very functional and something that's not going to be too much work for him. All right, stay tuned. We've got those soil test reports coming right up and the fertilizer recommendations.